Edgar Berlanga versus Padraig Mccory, 12 rounds in the 168-pound division. This is taking place on the 24th, happening in Orlando. Let's get into it. Let's start with Edgar Berlanga. 21 wins, no losses, 16 wins by way of knockout. The big thing with Berlanga when he first came into the scene was the power that he possessed, right? How he was knocking cats out. He didn't even get past the first round until his 17th, 18th fight. He was stopping everybody in the first round, and it was great to watch. It was great to see. It was building his resume. It was building his name as this one-shot knockout hitter quitter type of guy. You get into the ring with Berlanga, you're getting stopped in the first round. It was great for the image of Berlanga, but for the personal development inside the ring, we still were not sure how good this guy really was, if we're being honest. But as we always know, and as many of you know, as many of you have been watching boxing for years, at some point the development competition has to step up. You have to keep fighting better guys. And so we were going to see very quickly that this wasn't going to last. You can't just bulldoze every single opponent that you face. When he fought Demond Nicholson, yeah, that was a one-sided fight. It was a fight that his first fight that went the distance, right? But it was a one-sided fight for Berlanga. But it was good to see him kind of get those rounds in, kind of seeing what else that he has inside of his tool bag rather than just a guy who can punch. After that, he fought Steve Rolls, who went 4 rounds with Triple G. So he's faced someone who's a big puncher. So Berlanga's power isn't going to intimidate Rolls because he's been in there with a big puncher in his own right. Against Rolls, you started to see some of the holes in Berlanga's development, right? Holes can always be patched, but you first have to see where those holes are. And we got to see those holes in that fight. For example, some of the stuff that I saw was the fact that he wasn't cutting off the ring, right? He wasn't throwing consistent combinations. He wasn't setting up his shots. He became one-dimensional and was always looking for that one shot, that right hand to close out the show. But the more the competition comes up, you got to find different ways to be crafty, to be tricky, to be strategic, to be surgical inside of the ring. You can use that power that you have, but you got to set it up so it works all together simultaneously. But credit to Steve Rolls, because even though he was older, he was moving very well, using his jab, right? Landing good shots against Berlanga, and he was boxing very well, right? I thought he made it tough for Berlanga to really have his way in the fight. And I thought Rolls, as the fight was going on, I thought he was getting more and more and more confident inside of the ring. In some rounds, though, I felt like that fight, man, Berlanga was kind of hot and cold. Like some rounds, it looked like he knew what he was doing. And then some rounds, he looked a little confused and the inexperience was starting to show. Now, I felt like he could have stopped Rolls, right? But he became very one-dimensional and very predictable. And a guy who is experienced as Steve Rolls, who's faced a guy like Triple G, just coming forward and letting your hands go, that's not how you're going to beat him. You need to be able to add a little bit more strategy and tactic to it. And those were still things that Berlanga was still working on and things that he needed to figure out in real time. When he fought Angulo, man, I felt like that was a dangerous fight for him because, I mean, this is a guy skill level wise. Angulo has fought for a world title twice. And even though he came up short, I mean, he still has some dangerous things that he possesses. And that's a man that can punch. And it's a man that can take a shot, right? I thought in that fight, Berlanga used his jab better in the early part of that fight. He showed more of a strategic approach. He was using feints to try and get openings, find openings, create openings, and he just was more patient in the fight. And you could see that punching placement was something that he was trying to work with, trying to be more effective with, and trying to make a priority. You could see him started to think a little bit more inside of the ring. There were moments throughout that fight, once Angulo decided, I'm going to let my hands go here, I'm going to be the aggressor here, when those shots started to connect on Berlanga's chin and body, it was slowing him down a little bit. Berlanga is a guy, man, who needs to come forward, who needs to be on the front foot. And against Angulo, there were rounds where Berlanga was fighting off of the back foot, and it wasn't a good look. But we did get to see he does have the counter-punching ability to be effective and to make an impact when he does land, when he is focused on counter-punching. He can do that. But it wasn't natural for him. It wasn't natural for him to fight off of the back foot with his size and his power. He's supposed to be the one that's the imposing figure. But credit to Angulo for his experience, man, because when he decided to come forward, he took that risk. If you're going to hit me, I'm going to get a couple of mine off. And I thought Angulo had him in trouble a couple times in that fight. In the last 3 rounds, man, that's where I felt like Berlanga looked tired to me. Right. But I gave Berlanga credit because he handled himself well. And even though he was tired, and even though Angulo was getting closer and clipping him with different shots, he didn't respond with emotion. Right. When he was getting tagged, he didn't just come forward and try to get his get back. When he got tagged, he took a step back, he paused, he reset it and found himself away from the ropes, away from the corner, and tried to get back at the center of the ring, or at least tie him up so that way he could get himself out of danger. So I did like that. I like the composure that we were starting to see from that Angulo fight. Maybe if Angulo was, 3-4 years younger, that fight might have had a different outcome. But there were parts in that fight that I was starting to say, man, Berlanga, he's trying to think his way as he is fighting. In his most recent fight, he fought Jason Quigley, and I saw improvements to me, man. I thought Berlanga, like we know Berlanga can punch, right? And he dropped Quigley, I want to say 3 or 4 times in that fight. I think 4. And each time, man, he set it up a little bit differently. One of those knockdowns, I think Quigley, he was a little bit more off balance than anything. But he was starting to set things up a little bit more. He wasn't just coming forward and swinging for the heavens, right? I felt like he did a great job of stalking Quigley and not chasing Quigley. And because he was stalking Quigley and wasn't chasing him, he was able to anticipate where he was going to be and punch where he was going to be and try to be a step ahead of him. And when he was in range, he let his hands go in combinations and not just 1-2 shots, like not just one pot shots. He just was putting things better. He was being more efficient. He was being more effective. He was adding some strategy behind it. And I liked what I saw of him in that fight. Now, defensively, still some things that he's going to have to work on. He's probably not going to be the greatest defensive fighter. From an athletic standpoint, Berlanga, man, he's a big, brawling, bruising figure, but he's not necessarily the most athletic guy. So certain movements is going to be a little bit tough for him to navigate in and out of. There was the 7th round when both men landed exchanges against each other, right? And Berlanga got the worst of that exchange because it backed him up completely, but he stayed composed and he just marched forward and he was able to get back the momentum that he almost lost. His chin seems like it's getting a little bit stronger as well, too. So even though Berlanga has some things to work on defensively, man, offensively, you start to see him thinking a little bit more and using what God gave him, that God-given power, but also adding some strategy behind it to set things up a little bit better, man. I thought it was a much better performance from Berlanga. Obviously, he's always confident, but I thought it was a much more complete fight of Berlanga. But man, great thing about him is he's got the power and he's got the right shot, the right hand that can change anything at the right moment. And that will always be a strength of his. Let's talk about his opponent, Padraig Mccory. 18 wins, no losses, 9 wins by way of knockout. Now, I'm not 100% familiar with Mccory. I think I only saw maybe 2 or 3 fights of him. I saw his most recent fight, but from the entirety of him as his career, I'm not 100% familiar with the entirety of his career. But from the stuff that I've seen of him, man, he's got a good jab, he's got a good reach, he's got a good size, right? He's confident. He not really a big puncher, but he's not a light puncher as well, too. He's not a physical fighter, but he can be physical if that's where the fight goes. And I think he's tougher than he looked. And going back to that physical fight, when he fought Leon Boone in Boone's home country in Germany, I mean, that was a fight where I saw heart, I saw grit, I saw him knowing that, look, this is not a boxing masterclass of a fight. I'm going to need to be grueling here. I'm going to need to be brawling here. I'm going to need to stand in the pocket, and I'm going to have to create openings and create my own offense as I'm getting busy right here from in close. And I thought he did a great job of that. And it was a fight that I said, yo, this guy's pretty good from close range activity, right? He put forth some nice body shots from in close that had good momentum on him. He put forth some nice overhand rights that had some nice momentum on him, right? Some nice steam on him. I said, man, this guy can fight from in close. And he was able to close out that show and get the win. Now, there were some fights that I've seen of Mccory where he looks really tired in one moment, and then he catches his breath in the same moment. Like, he knocked Boone out in the 6th round, but in that 6th round, he looked really exhausted. Like, he looked tired. So maybe he's playing a little bit of possum in that category, or maybe he really is tired. But something to keep in mind as we're talking about this fight. In his most recent fight, he fought Steed Woodall. That was an interesting fight, right? Like, both men were having success early. I mean, both men hurt each other within the first 3 rounds. So that was a telling to see what type of fight that was going to be. Both men was throwing big, heavy punches. I thought Mccory, when he uses his jab, is an accurate puncher. It sets things up. I thought his placement in his punches in that fight was really well done. I like the body shots that he was doing. I like the work that he was doing and the consistency of how he was creating his own opening. Now, on the defensive side, he was taking some body shots from Woodall, man. Some nice sternum punching body shots, man. And I felt like there were moments where maybe he was just a little bit overconfident here. Maybe he was that confident, but he would have his hands down a little bit lower than it needs to, right? And there would be times when he would be looping in the left hand or coming over the top with the right hand, either hand, but he'd have his chin up. He left himself a little bit too exposed when he was shooting that right hand or that left hand, right? He had his chin up nice and high. And if his opponent wasn't as tired and was a better counterpuncher and had some steam on him, maybe that's something that Mccory would not come in, because he would need to be cautious of what was going to come back at him. I think Berlanga has the ability and the power to make him pay. If he overcommits to a shot and doesn't snap his hands back and get back to a defensive stance, he could be in trouble. I think if he misses or overcommits, Berlanga is going to make him pay, especially to the body. Mccory seems like a guy who will take that risk if he needs to, and he's willing to do that. But is it going to be the smartest play? Obviously, we'll see on the night. There are moments throughout that fight against Woodall that Mccory was able to impose his size and his frame. I don't think he's going to have as much ease doing that against Berlanga, because Berlanga's a bigger guy to me, right? But again, throughout that fight, there's moments and rounds where Mccory looks gassed. He's sucking for air, and then 1 second he turns it back on and he lets off a 3-4 piece combination. So, again, maybe he really is that tired, and maybe it's tactical and he's playing possum a little bit. So I thought it was a solid performance from him. I wasn't too impressed with his last performance. It was a solid performance, but I wasn't too impressed with it. So who wins? I like Berlanga to win this fight, man. He hasn't had a stoppage in the last 4 or 5 fights, but I think on this night, I think that streak will come to an end, and I like Berlanga to win this fight by stoppage. I think Mccory's defense is a little bit shaky. I think he gets hit a decent amount. I don't think he will be able to stay away from Berlanga for 12 rounds, man. I thought Quigley tried to do that, and then it didn't work out in his favor. Once he got dropped the first time, you could see the momentum and confidence of Quigley was kind of dwindling down a little bit. So it's going to be interesting, man. Can Mccory gain Berlanga's respect is going to be another question that he has to think about as well, too. And when he is in close, he has to impose his size and his figure, and he has to be physical. And how long can he stay inside of the pocket without getting clipped with the shot? Berlanga doesn't need a whole lot to really land his shots. He was able to drop Quigley 4 times, even though he didn't get the stoppage. That's still a lot of shots that a person is taking, so how many of those shots can Mccory take if he finds himself in that position? I don't think he'll be able to outbox or evade Berlanga for 12 rounds. What are your thoughts on this fight? Who do you have winning this one? Let me know in the comment section below. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a couple ways that you can do so. You can like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support by way of donation, you can find options in the description below. Also, my Cash App handle will be on screen as well. Any amount goes towards the growth of this channel. It will be greatly, greatly appreciated. Shout out to everybody that continues to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Shout out to all the members holding down the membership section, man. I appreciate each of you. So with all that being said, if you've been watching the video, this one, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, and we'll definitely see you next time.